Salam sejahtera semua. Welcome to another episode of Dialogue. My name is Adam.
Hey, hi. Welcome to the Dialogue podcast. My name is Dicky, and tonight we are going to be talking about I would not say serious, but really interesting topic.
We are back in Tioman Island to record another session of our podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, for good reasons. We have a guest with us today that's going to talk about something really important.
Really important, yeah.
Let me introduce him first.
Mm-hmm.
He is a marine biologist.
Okay.
Marine biologist. Graduated with University Malaysia of Sabah, and he got his master's degree in marine science,
Okay.
which is at National University of Malaysia. Experienced program manager with history in research industry, skill in biodiversity, environmental awareness and education. He is currently the chief program officer of Reef Malaysia. Appeared in various TV programs, features in many mainstream articles.
Yeah.
I feel really honored to having him in our podcast right now, right?
I mean, it's not easy to know or to you know.
Oh, Dicky, I'm not finished yet.
I know. It's not easy. I mean, to know people of such credibility, and I feel really honored as well.
He is also an instructor for both of us. He certified us as an eco diver.
Eco diver, yes.
Yeah?
Eco diver program, yeah.
And also a technical diver. Most importantly, a husband and a father to a loving family.
A humble person.
Yes. And of course, he's currently based in Tioman Island as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you guys to Alvin.
Hi everyone. Thank you. That was very, very flattering. I don't know if I deserve all that. But yeah, I'm very happy to be here as well. Very excited to talk to both of you.
Thank you for coming, Alvin. Let's just go right into the question.
The topic that we'll be talking today is mainly about coral bleaching. But before that, we want to ask Alvin about Reef Check itself. So, Alvin, if you don't mind, if you can just elaborate or explain to us and the listeners, what is Reef Check Malaysia and what's the history behind it, and perhaps the objective of Reef Check Malaysia itself?
Okay, sure. So, Reef Check was actually designed as a scientific monitoring tool to monitor the health of coral reefs.
Okay.
Right? And this is way back in 1996.
1996. Oh,
yes,
okay.
So that was when it was first designed by an American. And what they started doing was just checking the health of reefs around the world. The big difference was Reef Check was designed to use non-scientists. So it was called citizen science, and it could use your everyday diver with some training. They could be involved in these surveys. Now, since then, Reef Check has grown. It has become a non-profit organization in many countries. It's currently present in about 90 countries and territories around the world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the
really
Malaysian...
big, huh?
Yes, correct. The headquarters is in California, but they've opened up in many different places. Now, in Malaysia, Reef Check was registered as a non-profit organization in 2007. Before that, Reef Check was conducted in Malaysia, but it was done through the universities, like University Malaya. Okay, but in 2007, it was registered as a non-profit. And besides monitoring the health of coral reefs, because we were doing these surveys and we were getting this data, so we knew how the reefs were doing, we knew what some of the problems were, and then we said like, well, what's next, right? So they started getting involved in conservation efforts, right? And the whole idea was to promote sustainably managed marine ecosystems, in particular coral reefs. Okay, so this led to things like marine education programs with the schools on the islands, Perhentian, Redang, Tioman. It later led to community management programs. So we started training local islanders how to get involved in managing and protecting the coral reefs in their own island. So for example, on Tioman, we started training them in 2015. We identified islanders that were interested. We taught them how to scuba dive, and then we got them involved in removing ghost nets, in installing mooring lines, in doing reef check surveys, beaching surveys, things like that. And now we've got teams in Malaysia, we've got teams in Mersing, who covered the Mersing Islands like Pulau Ao, Tinggi, Sibu, Besar, Pemanggil. We've got a team on Redang. We've got a team in Kota Kinabalu, one on Mantanani, and another in Semporna, looking at the islands of Semporna.
Okay.
So besides these teams doing programs in these locations, we also monitor the health of around 300 reefs around the country on an annual basis. So every year we go back, we do the reef check surveys, and that gives us like a report card. It tells us if the hard coral is maintaining, is it on a decline, and that gives us clues on what the issues could be.
And who will benefit this data? I mean, is it the public that is utilizing this data?
So that's a very good question. So we make this data freely available. We give it to the Department of Fisheries, to the government agencies. It's also shared to the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, GCRMN. So this is a global network, and we provide this data for free. And even universities, all the local marine universities that teach the marine courses, if any student gets in touch with us and says, hey, can I get raw data? We will give them the raw data for free. But we also publish the reports annually, and that's also available for the public freely on our website. Because for us, our main point is we want those in power, like managers, the Department of Fisheries, governments, to make informed decisions.
Okay.
Right? So if they're going to make a decision, we want them to be able to have all the information they need, be able to look at it and say like, this is the situation, this is what's going on, this is what we're going to do. We don't want them to guess. And the big thing, a lot of these other government agencies, the universities, they don't have that info because manpower. The only reason we can cover this 300 plus reefs is because we use a lot of volunteers, eco-divers like yourselves, right? Reef check staff, if you were just going to be us doing the surveys, no way we could cover it, because each survey needs a minimum of 5 people. But because we've got this pool of volunteers, that's why we are able to go out and collect all this info.
Okay.
As the Chief Program Officer of Reef Check, what is your role in the organization?
So right now, my role is to oversee the programs that are being run. So just basically, because I'm one of the older ones in the organization, I'm just helping out the other team members. So if somebody in Mersing has a particular issue, they need help with something, then I'd go and help them out with that. If someone in KK needs some help, I'd go and help them out with that. It's just basically providing support for everyone and making sure that all the different locations, the programs are being able to run smoothly.
Maybe you can give us like a recent example of what you have done, just recently, where we have been, and what is the duty.
Just last month, we were going to map out the reefs around Pulau Ao and Pulau Dayang and Pemanggil, right? So basically, these islands, they're not as developed as Tioman is, right? They used to be rather popular with diving, and then for a while there was a break where people were not allowed to dive it, and now it's opening up again.
Okay.
Right? But because of all these different complications, and because it's also far and rather remote, very little study has been done there before. So they needed to map out these sites, right? And because I have done that similar mapping for Tioman in the past, I went over to help the Johor team, do it with them, to show them how it's done, and train them basically how they can then continue going about doing this mapping.
Is it done? Is it finished?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I saw it on social media. It's quite a big team that you have, right?
We went in 2 teams, 2 boats, right? So we broke up, and then half were doing one side while the other half were doing something else. Yeah. So even that, our full-time staff in Johor in Mersing is only 4 people. But then similarly, they have been identifying locals and training them there. But I also did bring some of the experienced local islanders from Tioman over to help out there. Because the guys here, they've been working with us now since 2015. So a lot of them have done all these trainings. They did the mapping with us on Tioman. So I brought them along to Ao and Pemanggil to go and do this.
When you say you map, so does it mean that you dive the whole reef? I mean, inch per inch, or
Okay.
what's the process? How does it work when you say you map?
All right. So for exercise like this, basically what we want to know is where we've got reefs, where we don't have reefs. How far does the reef extend from the shore? How deep is the maximum depth we are seeing reefs? So we use sonar on the boat, right? So that helps us to map it. But every few hundred meters, we have to dive to ground truth. So we're using the sonar, and the sonar is telling us that the reef ends at 16 meters, for example. And then we would dive it to check that it's actually ending at that depth. You know?
Okay.
And then we would mark the GPS. So at the end of the day, what we will have is a map around the island, and we will be able to tell you, like, here the reef extends this far off from the shore.
All
and
right.
it ends at 20 meters. Here the reef extends, and it was very interesting. You know why? In some of the sites around Dayang and Pemangil, you swim out 20 meters and you're hitting like 35 meter
Oh
depth.
yes.
Yeah.
Pemangil. That
For
I
me.
used to.
Oh, yeah. You're familiar with Pemangil, exactly.
On the main kampung.
I never knew that, right? I never realized that. And then we were just going shortly off the shore, and it was hitting 40 meters, 35 meters.
Yes.
So yeah, very interesting.
It
Very,
is
very
interesting. Currents are strong there as well. But when you talk about those areas, and since that you have done your surveys and mapping and all, how would you categorize the reef there in that area?
Oh, it's very healthy.
It's very healthy.
Yeah, the live coral cover is very high.
Uh-huh.
The reef is very dense. You don't get a lot of patchy reefs. Fish life is abundant.
Yes.
Yes, you know. So it ticks all the boxes. So even when we were there, it was interesting because the bleaching had already started.
All right.
Right? And relatively, we saw very little bleaching in those islands. Yeah, but it makes sense because it's close to deep water, so you got a lot of nice clean water coming in.
Cool water coming
It's
up.
far away from your mainland, from development. There's very little pollution reaching it from mainland. Yeah, there's very low impact on the reef because there's not many users. You know, they don't get the kind of crowds we are getting. So all this makes sense when you think about it, and that explains why they're so healthy out there.
Speaking about coral bleaching, this is the main reason why all three of us are sitting here today. We are currently experiencing the 4th Global Coral Bleaching Event.
Yep.
I think it started around March, I believe, Alvin. So would you like to explain to us what is coral bleaching?
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, corals, right? When you look at them, you see the color. This color does not come from the coral animal itself. This actually comes from a kind of algae called zooxanthellae that lives in the soft tissue of the coral. So the algae, it's a symbiotic situation. So both benefit. The algae photosynthesizes during the day and produces about 80% of the food the coral polyp needs. That's why in the night we actively see corals feeding, but we don't see so much of that during the day, right? Now, what happens when the coral gets stressed is the environment in the soft tissue is no longer suitable for the algae to be there. So they usually get expelled, right? The algae is gone. Now, all you're seeing is the soft tissue and the skeleton structure underneath. That's why it looks white. And that's why the term bleaching is given to this phenomena, right? So when the coral is bleached, it is still alive, but it is stressed. And because it is no longer getting that 80% of food, it's basically going into a starvation period. Now, if the stress is removed, then the coral can recover. Algae will enter back into the soft tissue. The coral will regain its color, and it will continue to survive healthily, right? But if the bleaching is prolonged, like 6 weeks more, you will start to see corals start to die. Okay, so this is the whole scenario with bleaching. Now, Adam, you mentioned it's the 4th mass bleaching. You're right. And this time, actually, in most cases, when it has been such a large scale, the main factor, the reason for the bleaching has been hot water.
Temperature. Can anything else other than temperature aggravate coral bleaching as well?
Yes. So diseases can, infections can, even things like, for example, if you've got a lot of runoff So for
Okay.
example, they cut the hill on the island.
Mm.
During rain, a lot of mud washes in and there's a lot of silt on the corals. It will stress them out. They can bleach as well.
Mm.
You know, ocean acidity can cause bleaching as well if that place is very acidic. But these are normally confined to that small area that was impacted. Pollution can cause bleaching. But when it's at a large scale, it's usually temperature.
Usually,
Because
okay.
so like this year we were experiencing a very hot year, and it wasn't just us. It was Australia, Indonesia, Maldives, Philippines, Thailand, everywhere. I was in Bali in January, and the corals were already bleached at Tulambin.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
and Bali is usually associated with colder water,
Cold
right?
water and
Yeah. So that's why this mass bleaching, it's mainly because the hot temperature that we're experiencing.
Based on the current trajectory of the weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this coral bleaching happening more often? So do you think the frequency are getting more and more? It's getting faster between each coral bleaching events.
Wait, so that's a very good question lah.
Yeah.
Because the first mass coral bleaching event was recorded in 1998. Okay, and then the next one was 2010. The following one was around 2016 to 2018. Okay, it was a bit more spread out because that year that bleaching event was a bit weird. Some places were hit in 16, some were hit in 17, right? And now the next one is 2024. So what we are seeing is it is happening more frequently, and in fact, what we are also noticing is the intensity is also becoming greater.
Mm.
So this is quite a worrying thought, right? Now corals, they are very fussy animals lah. Okay, they are very, very fussy. You can find corals in a large range of temperature, like from about 19 degrees to about 30 degrees. You can find reefs. They are mainly around the equator. You go too far north or south of the equator, you lose hard corals, right? But a coral, like it's growing in Tioman, it's used to temperatures around 28, 29 degrees. Yeah, it can tolerate a change of about 2 degrees.
Oh, only
More-
that much, huh?
Yeah, that's the thing. So when you see a change in about more than 2 degrees, you start to see bleaching, right? So it's a very small range for change, and this is a big issue when we talk about corals, right? And again, we are being very general here because there's so many different species of corals. Some corals are more heat resistant compared to others, but this is generally speaking as a whole. Like Port Dickson, for example, it's heavily polluted. Straits of Malacca, visibility is not great. There's all kinds of things going on, but you still get corals. Big difference is it's nothing like what you would get on Tioman. The diversity, the number of species is way lower compared to what we have here. The corals they have there are the hardiest, the most tahan lasa. You throw them, all those different things,
Because they're
they still
exposed to
can go.
all elements and
Yeah.
Maybe
All the weaker ones have,
pollution and so
so
on.
basically the weaker ones have died out already,
okay.
right? So you're only stuck with a few species that are hardy.
Can you give us an example of the types of corals that are hardy and the ones that actually will die off first?
This is a very good question as well, right? Because in the past, what we normally see is things like your acroporas, so your branching corals, your table corals, those tend to bleach first. Okay? This time around, especially like on Tioman, surprisingly what we saw bleach first was your blue corals, your fire corals, your porites. Porites are normally your big boulders. Those are normally one of those that are a bit more resilient.
Okay.
They tend to bleach later. But this time around, we saw them bleach before the acroporas, which is interesting. It's very surprising. And there's lots to study when it comes to temperature resistance and stuff like that. But one thing we must take note that the algae plays a role in all this as well, because you got certain zooxanthellae that are more heat tolerant than other zooxanthellae. Yeah, and a lot of studies are being done about this. especially like Coral Coup. You've heard of Coral Coup in Lang Tengah and all. They've been doing experiments specifically on heat stressing corals, and then trying to find out which species are more resistant compared to the others. And this is very important science, right? Because if we know that kind of information, then when we set out to do reef replanting, rehabilitation, we would want to target those species. It is interesting. There's still a lot we don't know, still a lot to be studied, and it sometimes can just throw us off the rail like this with this bleaching that we are seeing here.
Oh, I've recently been to the northern part of, actually the northeast part of Peninsular Malaysia. Oh my God, I tell you, man, most of the corals from 0 to 12 meters, I would say 90% of them are bleach. It's more like, when you go down, it's like it feels like you are in snow.
Oh,
It's just white. But whereas
that better?
yeah, it is that bad. I mean, but from 12 meters onwards, it's not so bad. Maybe because, of course, it's the surface, right? So it's much more hotter than below. But in Tioman, it's a bit better, I would
Yes.
think. I mean, since diving here for a few days, or maybe they are actually recovering now, since the cold water are coming back. I mean, when I was there at Lang Tengah, the dive master and the instructors were telling me they are hitting 33, 34 degrees of water,
Water
temperature
temperature.
over there. Yeah, over here, maybe we get 31, 32, I believe.
Yeah, the highest we
Yeah.
recorded was 32 as well. But what you're saying is right, because like I told you, my colleagues in Redang, so we knew this bleaching was going to happen last year because we use satellite images to predict, how hot the year is going to be. And basically, we knew this was going to happen. So we started monitoring at the start of the year. And every 2 weeks, we go down and do a bleaching monitoring survey. And in Redang, we were recording 80%, more than 80% of the reef was bleached. Okay? And in Tioman, the highest we hit was about 35%. You are right in saying that a lot of places in Terengganu, and we heard similar from Perhentian, from Lang Tengah, from Tenggol, that they were suffering more bleaching compared to us. I think one of the big reasons is we had more rain in May. Okay, May got really hot, so we put water temperature loggers in the reef, the water, right? And they record temperature every half an hour. They would record the temperature, and like I was saying,
Interesting, huh? The gadgets that they're using, Okay.
and we saw that in May it hit 32 degrees, right?
Okay.
But it got really hot, and then we started seeing some rain, and then water started to cool down again. Then we got the southern winds, and the southern winds also brings in murkier water from the Johor Straits, right? So this murky water, even though it's not great for us divers, but it actually helps to provide some artificial shading.
Okay.
Because now the water is not so clear. Your sunlight, your UV rays, they're not directly hitting the corals, right? There's this shading going on. Whereas in Redang, in Terengganu, the water is still crystal clear this time of the year. So unfortunately, all the sun rays, all those UV lights, it's hitting directly down, right? That's why we in Pahang and in Johor were not hit as bad as they all in Terengganu.
Oh, okay.
I learned something new today.
Me too.
I've never thought of that before, like
So-called
visibility.
eco divers.
Hey, no lah.
But yeah, you learn something every day, right?
Even before this thing happened, you guys already know a year ahead of time that this bleaching is going to happen. How do you go about it? How do you know that it's going to happen?
We knew about 6 months ahead lah. So basically, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency in America, they've got satellites that monitor sea surface temperature. We've been doing this for a long time, and we can predict based on temperature, on weather patterns, right, how hot the water is going to be. Based on that, they actually issue warnings, right? So if you're interested in this kind of things, you can actually go to their website and subscribe. So I've subscribed for Malaysia, the Malaysian waters. So every time they predict the water is going to get hot, they will send you a warning. So it will first go as a watch. it's like a warning. They've got different levels, and they've got alert 1, alert 2. So based on that, we predicted that there was going to be bleaching. So as a preemptive thing, we started monitoring even before the bleaching happened. Because we have been working with NOAA for many years now, we help them ground truth their satellites. So they would say, we think there's going to be bleaching here. And we would check, and then if there's no bleaching, we'll tell them, no, there's no bleaching. The satellite readings are off, right? But then if there is bleaching, then we'll tell them, yes, it is bleaching. This is the extent. How many percent is bleached? What are the species that are bleaching? Yeah, that kind of stuff. So basically, using those satellites. And you could see it move. You could see the hot water move. You could see it come through Indonesia, Philippines, cross the South China Sea, hit us. So yeah, this is something y'all can subscribe to if you're interested.
Okay.
It's free. They make it freely available for everyone.
So it's the weather forecast for the ocean temperature.
Yeah,
More or
sea
less.
surface temperature.
Yeah, sea
Correct.
surface temperature.
Yes, correct.
So I would like to know, why is this coral bleaching so important? What is the impact of this coral bleaching?
Okay, so the main fear about bleaching at such a mass scale like this is a mass death of reefs at once, right? Because you said you saw 80% of the reef bleach in Terengganu. Imagine if they didn't recover and we lost 80% of our corals just like that. Now, reefs are important because they are a nursery for about 30% of all marine life. And they are home to about 25% of marine fish. So if we lose this ecosystem, we are automatically going to lose all this marine life. So there's going to be a major collapse of the food cycle, right? The food chain. We're going to lose so many species just like that at once, which other species depend on for food, right? A lot of people don't realize this. We always say like, the earth is covered in 70% of seawater, blah, blah, blah. But we can only find corals in 1%, less than 1% of our sea.
Of that 70%.
Yes, correct. Because they grow in very specific areas. Okay? So now we know this small little area is home to all this marine life. So if we lost this small area, we're going to lose all this marine life. And this will affect not only ecologically, but also it's going to affect us humans, right? Number one, source of protein. There are so many people, we in this coral triangle in Southeast Asia, we are so heavily dependent on seafood as our main source of protein, as a main source of nutrition. So if we lost that, all these people will be affected, right?
Yeah.
Then livelihoods. Fishermen will be out of job. Tourism will be affected as well, and if the reefs die off, then even physical properties, like they act as a wave breaker. Okay, they help absorb wave action and stop erosion. But if we lost the reef, this function will also be gone. So we'll start to see a lot more beach erosion. Yeah. So it affects not only ecologically but also humans, especially in a place like Malaysia where we are a peninsula and we are an island, right? Borneo. So our lives are actually very, very related to reefs and to marine life. So yeah, the impact would be quite devastating if these bleached corals didn't recover. So like you said earlier, you've been diving last few days and you noticed that your mind's not too bad. So just day before yesterday, we did the bleaching, our bi-weekly bleaching monitoring, and we are seeing it recover, right? So it's really good news for Tioman especially. We know that the water has been cold. We've been getting all these strong winds. I know it's not great for diving, right? Everyone cannot go out, cannot go to Tulai. But it is cooling the water, and we are seeing. So even in Rengges, you're seeing the corals, all your foliose corals, like the cabbage corals, they're all getting back their color slowly.
Okay, so far we are not losing any corals just yet. Oh, I mean,
okay, I won't say not losing any.
Might not any, but yeah.
But it looks like it's recovering. So we did record some mortality. Unfortunately, we did see some death, especially in the blue corals and fire corals. But even those big varieties I was talking about, we are seeing them recover, getting back their color.
If I may ask, in total, roughly, how big of a coral area are we not getting back? Or
Oh, I think it's too early to say.
okay,
Honestly, it's too early to say. Right now, the death we are seeing is less than 5% or so.
but
It's
that 5%
still
is still big though. Yeah.
True. But it's less than 5% lah. It's like in the 2%, something like that. But it's really too early to say because we are seeing them get back their color, but there's still large patches of white. And one more thing I would bring up is when the coral is bleached, they are weak because they are starving, right? So they are weak. They are very susceptible to infection, to bacterial infection, to diseases, and we've seen this before. Right after the bleaching, we see a black band disease, we see a brown band disease,
Oh yeah, okay.
and that will also kill coral, right? So honestly, like for us, what we are going to do now is just continue this monitoring closely until everything is recovered, it's got back its color, but then still continue monitoring a bit longer to watch out, look out for any of this kind of disease.
What's the
outbreak.
so what's the forecast? Is it getting cooler or is it
It
gonna come back? I mean, the hot temperature, is it gonna come back? And what's the forecast, or what's the thing that you're seeing
Okay,
now?
so based on the satellite predictions, it's getting cooler. Seems like we've passed the heat spell. It's going away. It's cooling down. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it's going to come back. So it's actually quite promising. We are honestly very relieved lah.
Okay.
This week, so every so and often we get the warnings, the updates, and this week we got the latest update we got this week was that it's passing.
Because coral, in order to coral to grow or to recover, it take a long time to recover and so on.
Exactly.
And generally, how long can you, maybe give a number? How long does it take for coral to maybe recover from this? Is there any data from the last event?
So basically, once the temperature returned back to normal, in about a month, we already saw them regain their color.
Okay.
Right? In a
Okay.
month to a bit more lah. Generally speaking.
Mm.
Yeah.
Alvin, how do you identify a coral that is already dead? I know we learned this in our Eco Divers course, but would you like to explain to us
Sure.
how to divers identify a dead coral?
And this is actually a good question because a lot of divers, even people who've rather experienced, they struggle a little bit with this. This misunderstanding that if it's white, it's dead, right? So if a coral, for example, was just eaten by a crown of thorns, it will look white. And that is dead because the crown of thorns would have eaten all that soft tissue and the coral is dead. All you're seeing is the skeleton. When the coral bleaches, it has lost its color, but it's white because you're seeing through its soft tissue into the skeleton, right? So how do we differentiate these two things? Well, the first thing is what we want to look for is how clean the two look, and this might sound weird, but just hang in there. So basically a coral that is alive, even though it's bleached, it's still cleaning itself. So it's not going to let silt, and marine organic matter particles settle on it. Whereas a coral that's dead, it's going to have all the silt, its organic matter settle on it, right? So if you go near and it looks white, if you just give it a waft, if you see lots of stuff coming off it, most likely already dead, right? Another thing you can do is if you come really close, if you look really close at it, if it's dead, you will be able to see the patterns of the skeleton very clearly.
Okay.
The corallites, the different patterns you would see on corals, that would be more obvious compared to a coral that is bleached. Because a bleached coral still has the soft tissue, still have to see through the tissue to see the skeleton structure underneath. Yeah, so these are the two easiest ways. Just go in, give it a waft, look for things coming off, then go closer, look clearly. If you can see all the lines very clearly, then it is dead. Now, if it has been dead for a while, maybe a couple of weeks or so, then you would already start seeing small little seaweed grow on it. So it will have like a light brownish color or a reddish color or a greenish, like very faint. Like it look like hairs, which a bleached coral will not have. Yeah, so that'll be the easiest way for you to differentiate these two things.
A healthy coral will probably be in vibrant color,
Mm-hmm.
and it's clean.
Yep.
Definitely clean. So
Yep.
a dead one is likely going to be dirty, silty. And also, as Alvin said, if it's been dead for quite some time, there will be seaweed growing through it.
Yep.
Early on, you said you did the monitoring and so on, right? You more or less expected, knowing that the coral bleaching is coming and so on. So, what have you done prepare for this coral bleaching event?
When we get these alerts, when we get these warnings based on the sea surface temperature, what we do is we've got a bleaching response plan for Malaysia, right?
Bleaching response plan. Okay.
Yeah, so basically we wrote this based on bleaching response plans in other countries, and you know. So what we do is first thing will be to kickstart your monitoring. So we start with every other week we go down and monitor, right? And then once it goes into once we actually start to see bleaching happening, right? Once it hits like about 10%, we start doing predator removals. So you take out crown of thorns, take out drupellas, because you want to reduce the competition on the reef. You want to reduce the impact to the corals, right? And once that goes higher, right? Once it gets to about 50%, we already start talking. Now, mind you, when the bleaching, before it even happens, when we get this warning, a big thing that we do is also communication. We started talking about this on our social media, started telling people this is something we are expecting this year. And this is basically just preparing people so that when it does happen, it's not a shock, right? Because after doing predator removals and we still see bleaching increasing, one of the other things that is commonly done is site closures.
Okay.
Right? And we don't want a knee-jerk reaction. We don't want people panicking. We don't want people to be like, what's going on? Oh, they're closing the site because bleaching. What's bleaching? We want people to be ready before that. So they already know this was in the news. They read about it. We've updated, government agencies. People are talking about it. So when you introduce the site closures, people would accept it better. And the whole idea behind site closures is you want to protect your healthiest reefs, your most resilient reefs. Because if you're going to lose a lot of corals, right, your most resilient reefs are the most likely to survive, and they are going to be the source of eggs during the next spawning. They are going to repopulate your other reefs, right? So for Tioman, for example, we had done resilience surveys in 2013 around the island, and in 2023, so very recently, right? So we know our resilient sites are Teluk Dalam, North Point, Lighthouse down in the south, and Batu Malang. So if anybody asked me, like when we were talking to the Department of Fisheries and they asked us, like, if we are going to close sites, if the bleaching gets worse, where would you suggest for Tioman? And we suggested these 4 sites, right? Another thing that is often done during bleaching events is they put a temporary ban on catching herbivore fish, because herbivore fish play an important role in eating algae, and algae competes with coral. So if the coral is sick, it's not going to be growing, it's not going to be fighting off algae. So the algae is like weeds in your garden, it can take over the reef. So they would put temporary bans on fishing of parrotfish, rabbitfish, things like that. But in Tioman, that's not a big issue because we are already a marine park, right? There's already a no fishing. So that's not relevant. So what we did here was we did lots and lots of crown of thorns removals, just to reduce the impact in preparation for. We didn't have to go into the site closure phase. But even that, like, we did communicate this with the Department of Fisheries, and they came down to the island and they met with the different dive shops in all the villages, to get a consensus. Like, look, if this gets worse, we're going to close sites. Are you all okay with that?
I've got 2 questions, but maybe this is off topic. But since one is with regards to the monitoring that you do, you did mention about monitoring. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit? When you say monitoring, what exactly do you do? What kind of exercise is it? And is it equipment intensive? If it is, if there's any equipment use, if you can just name some and maybe explain what is the equipment and how is it helping you in your monitoring?
Sure. So besides the satellite, right, we've got these water temperature loggers. So I'm just using very simple hobo loggers. They're just little small like this, pendant. And you can tie them down on the reef, secure them to something, and you can set it to record a temperature, whether every half an hour, every hour, every 10 minutes, right? And then you leave it down there for 5-6 months, and then go take it out, download it into your laptop, shows you what's going on. Okay? But when we go and do the bi-weekly monitoring, that is divers in the water. So what we do, we lay a measuring, we've got permanent sites that we're going to go back to every other week. We lay a transect tape, and then we record below the transect tape the percent of coral and how many percent is bleach. We've also marked along this transect tape, left and right, we've marked certain colonies, right, that we would go back and take a photo every 2 weeks with a quadrat. So basically a quadrat is like a square. Inside it's got smaller lines, smaller squares. So you place that over the coral and you take a photo. And that lets you calculate like the percent of bleaching of that colony.
Okay.
Yeah. We also take photo quadrats. So just random, put a quadrat down, take a photo, put a quadrat down, take a photo. That gives us basically more information on the percent of the reef that's bleached. So not too much fancy equipment really, just a good camera. We just use an Olympus. The quadrats are just made from PVC pipes.
All right.
Yeah. And then your measuring tape is your 100-meter measuring tape. So not very fancy, not too expensive, easy to get, and anyone can do.
Okay. And the other question that I have actually is with regards to the crown of thorns. So the warm temperature affects coral, and crown of thorns affects corals as well.
Yep.
So the question is, which is more serious? And you did say something about removing, one of the things that you do during coral bleaching is also to remove crown of thorns.
Yep.
And maybe the listeners wants to understand what is crown of thorns and why do you remove crown of thorns, especially during coral bleaching events.
So the crown of thorns, it's basically a starfish, right? It's got about 13 arms, okay? Can vary slightly. They've got long, sharp spines. That's why they're called the crown of thorns. And they're actually venomous. So if you get pricked, there is a little bit of toxic. Yeah. Now they are natural on the reef, right? We naturally find them in these waters, and they are one of the main predators of corals. They eat the soft tissue of corals. Now the big problem with crown of thorns is their main predators have been fished out. So things like your Napoleon wrasse, things like your trumpet triton snail, these are some of the main predators of the crown of thorns, right? So we don't get many of those these days, therefore nothing to eat them. The other thing we know is there are some studies that say with warmer water, the crown of thorns can reproduce more frequently.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, and one individual can produce over 1 million eggs. So this is why now we, in many places, we experience crown of thorn outbreaks.
Okay.
Right? So going back to your question, which is more important, which is more devastating? It's not an easy answer, right? You know why? Crown of thorns is something local. So it might be happening here on Tioman, but it might not be affecting Pemangil. Might not be affecting Ao. But when you have a mass bleaching like this, everyone is affected. But a crown of thorns, if not addressed properly, it can devastate a reef.
As quick as
coral
bleaching
so
or warm
I'll
temperature.
give you a good example. You know, on Tioman, we've been constantly monitoring the crown of thorns and killing them since we started working on the island, right? 2 years, we couldn't do it properly. When?
COVID
right?
time, yeah.
Because during COVID, the police said,
no diving.
We cannot dive for crown of thorns. They only allowed us for ghost net removal. You know, like when we knew there was a ghost net, we could get permission. But crown of thorns, they said no, it's not. They couldn't grasp the idea that it's important to do. And if you look at the reef check data, the survey data from Tioman, after 2020, like 2022, if you look at 22, you will see our hard coral drop and our number of crown of thorns spiked. Yeah, a good example. You guys have been diving this place for ages. Look at Pirate. Pirate, it is what it is today because of the crown of thorns. Like we were getting in one dive like 300 crown of thorns. You know what I mean? After COVID, when we went back, it was just so many. But now we've been able to cut it down again, bring the numbers back down. We're not seeing anywhere where that kind of numbers, But Renggis, Pirate, Soya, during COVID, when we went back, oh my goodness.
Lobster Point, maybe.
Yeah, the Dow.
Yeah.
The Dow also was hit really bad. So that's why we remove them during bleaching, just to remove the pressure on the living corals.
I would like to ask Alvin another interesting question that I think a lot of people has been debating.
Okay.
Is COVID, not being able to dive for 2 years, is it actually good for the environment? Is it actually make the marine ecosystem better off without human interaction at all? It's like, since we cannot dive for 2 years, there's no fishing for 2 years. Is it better for the environment? Alvin did mention that there's a widespread of crown of thorns. But overall, is it better without any human interaction?
Correct. So this is a very good question also, right? My answer is COVID was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was good for reefs, and we did see reefs recover in Terengganu, in Redang, in Perhentian, in Bidong. Coral cover actually increased. But like us on Tioman, we also did notice there was way more illegal fishing during that time. And you know when that happened? That happened during the CMCO, when fishing was set as an essential job. So what we noticed, a lot of people from mainland suddenly became fishermen. They are not real fishermen. They don't know anything about the sea. They don't know how to fish. They got a small boat. They bought gill nets, which is your thin monofilament nylon nets, right? And they encroached inside the marine park because they knew all the enforcer boats were being used for sending vaccines, sending food, sending people out to hospital. They encroached inside the marine park and they were netting our reefs. I recently published a scientific paper on the number of ghost nets collected from 2016 until 2022, and you will see during COVID the number of ghost nets we picked up spiked, because it were people who were not real fishermen coming in fishing. They don't know currents, they don't understand reef, so their nets were getting stuck on the reef, and then they panic and they run. They go back, so they leave the whole net there. So in that sense it was bad, right? But the good sense, people were off the reef, there was less pressure, so we did see a lot of recovery in certain places. For example, in Tioman, just at the Marine Park Center, every morning there was so many sharks there, black tips under the jetty. We were seeing turtles right under the jetty. But again, what we did see in some places was people lost jobs. There was no income from tourism. So what did they do? They went back to fishing. They went back to harvesting from the reef, get food, to get to sell for money. So it's not so easy as a good and bad. It really, there were some pros, but there also definitely were some cons.
I did come across some maybe friends or acquaintance who are fishermen, and they always put the blame on divers, because they say divers are the ones that destroying the reefs, and it's making it difficult for them to earn a living, because first of all, we are breaking the reef, so they say. We are making the because of that, we are also shooing away the marine life. Not only that, we are closing a lot of fishing areas and making it as a marine park and so on, so it's difficult for them to do fishing. As a diver, we see it differently, because I think it's safe to say that we as divers, we love the sea and we protect the sea. We do all sorts of conservation and all that kind of stuff to protect the sea. But as what you said, we saw, there's a spike of ghost nets and so on. What I'm trying to get here is that, what does the government see, or how do they see? So they see us as economic contributors, right? So divers or tourism, dive operators is contributing to economics as well as fishing as well. But the impact that fishermen's of fishing activity does to the marine life and the reef is much greater than the tourism industry. So how do they, balance that, and how do they maybe educate fishing industry as opposed to tourism industries to protect the marine ecosystem? If you have any information.
So if you see our main fishermen, right, our registered fishermen, you got Class A, Class B, Class C. Class A are your smallest fishing boats, right? But even they're not allowed fish close to shore, inshore. Simply because they don't want them damaging the reef. In fact, marine parks like Tioman Marine Park and all, when it was first created, one of the main objectives was food security. The idea was you ensure that fish can reproduce inside this protected area so that fishermen can sustainably fish the spillover.
Okay.
Because fish aren't going to stay inside the 2 nautical miles, right? They don't know where the line ends. So if they are happily breeding in here, there'll be lots of them and they will move out.
Yeah.
And then fishermen can keep fishing this. Whereas if you didn't have this and everyone fished everything here, then in a few years fishermen won't have anything. So the government is actually quite concerned about making sure the reefs are around so that fishing can be sustainable and prolonged. Yeah, and that's why they've got restrictions on how near the boats can come into shore. They've got restrictions on where they can fish, and even actually they are working on increasing the areas of marine protected reefs, marine protected zones in Malaysia, right? But it's a constant struggle. It's a cat and mouse. A lot of what we are seeing is illegal fishing. These nets we are picking up, like the ones I told you of them coming inside here, it's them encroaching inside the marine park and illegally fishing inside here.
Minus guys for asking all these off-topic questions.
Yeah.
It's just because there's Alvin is here. I mean, he is the right person to answer this question.
We want to try to get as much information as we can, and to understand
but
it all.
Then again, back to the coral bleaching
topic. Yes.
Yeah. So Alvin, what can we actually do as individual or as a community, to minimize, or even I dare to say to prevent this coral bleaching phenomenon?
What we're really trying to do when it comes to things like bleaching, like these global impacts, is we're trying to help build the reef resilience, make the reef as healthy as possible. And the way to do this is to reduce local impacts. So for example, let's take Tioman. What are our local impacts? So tourism, right? Unsustainably done. Like you said, people do have bad images sometimes on divers and snorkelers. They say they stand on the reef, they kick the corals. As a consumer, as a tourist, when you go for a holiday, make sure you are diving with a Greenfins Dive Center. You're snorkeling with a certified guide. Because these people are actually concerned and working towards reducing their impacts. You're going to stay somewhere. Stay with a resort that's environmentally friendly, that's working towards reducing its impacts, right? Things like having proper sewage treatment, where they're not just releasing their water into the
wastewater into the
correct,
sea.
So very sadly, very often Malaysian tourists, we go for the cheapest. So we need to promote this idea that, look guys, look for the ones that are actually trying to make a difference, support them. Because if we were able to control wastewater pollution, right? If we were able to control solid waste, if we were able to control physical impact from divers, snorkelers, touching, standing, if we were able to control development, how buildings were made, look at how resorts are made. Is everyone building into the water? Or are they keeping the rooms off the sea, off the beach? If we followed all these simple things, it would reduce local impacts to the reef. So now, when the bleaching comes along, when a hot water comes along, the coral only needs to recover from the hot water. Not at the same time having to deal with sewage pollution, with solid waste, with physical damage, with people anchoring on the reef. So it's similar, like just take both of us, yeah. So you, Dicky, you eat healthy, you work out, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you sleep well. I don't eat healthy, don't exercise, smoke a lot, drink a lot. If both of us get dengue, who would heal faster? Definitely you.
Yeah.
So the concept is the same. You reduce all the local impacts so that when the global impact comes along, the reefs have a higher chance of recovery. So this is what consumers can do on your end, right? Now, it's not enough. We also need to pressure government to really take action behind the root cause, which is carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. We really need to voice this importance. I think this is something our generation is actually quite good at compared to the baby boomers before us, right? We are aware of climate issues, climate crisis. And if you think about it, right, when I was growing up, I remember in school, the hot topic was CFC. CFC, there's a hole in the ozone, there's a hole in the ozone.
Yeah.
But we came together, governments agreed and banned it. Right? And you don't find CFC anymore, right? It's not in our spray cans. We used to put it in everything. Hairspray also, CFC. We did it. And before that, right, our parents, what did they have to deal with? Asbestos, lead. Lead was in everything, right? Petrol. They had to put stickers on unleaded petrol. Because all the other petrol was leaded, right? But they came together. As a human race, we realized lead is not good. It's killing us. And we stopped it, right? Asbestos, it was in everything in our houses, and then we realized this thing is killing us, and we stopped it. So we are a smart species, right? We can solve problems. We have done it before. We need to put that same pressure. We need to come together. We need to persuade governments to reduce greenhouse emissions.
So on top of that, we as individual, what can we do?
So besides supporting, local these businesses, when you go on holiday, support the environmentally friendly ones. I would say when you're at home, right? Simple things. Reduce your emissions as well. Okay? So think about how much electric you're using. Think about how much you're buying. Think about how much you're throwing away. In Malaysia, a lot of our waste still goes to incinerators. Right? So it's just being burnt. In Tioman, we've got an incinerator. We generate 8 tons of trash a day.
Oh, that's a lot.
During season. 8,000 kilos a day during season, right? And it's all being burned. So think, every time you go to the shop, you really need that plastic bag. You really need that packaging, These are all very small things. It seems minute, but it actually makes a big difference. So just try to be mindful of what you're buying, what you're using. Just try to reduce it. Keep it to the minimum necessities.
And I believe that us as a scuba diver, I think we also play an important role when it comes to awareness and maybe providing education to the public, to those who are actually not divers, that they don't know what's actually going on. I mean, simple things as just, take a camera down. It doesn't have to be scientific or anything, right? You just record nature, the beauty of the sea, and post it up. When people see something beautiful, something nice, automatically they would want to preserve it themselves. Be an ambassador.
Definitely.
And of course, I mean, there are always bad apples in the industry. There are also divers who are not so skillful. Maybe you as an instructor, you educate them better when it comes to marine conservation. And also, of course, be a better diver. Do not kick the corals, There has been an interesting popular topic this week in the dive community.
You're talking about the MBOR.
There's been a creation of a new dive site where they sunk 2 trains.
2 LRT coaches.
Into a marine park. The 2 LRT monorail coaches, more specifically at Monkey Bay in Tioman. What is your take in this, Alvin? Obviously, they are doing it for a good cause, as in to create an artificial reef for the fishes as protection, and also probably like a foundation for corals to grow. What is your take in putting a man-made structure into the natural environment?
Yeah, this is very interesting because this just happened and there was so much buzz about it. And I got a lot of people texting me also like, bro, what is this? What's going on, bro? Okay, honestly, right? When we put things in the sea, it is not always for corals to grow, right? A lot of people call it artificial reef now and they expect it's for corals, but it's not always for corals to grow. We've been doing this for generations, way before we even knew that we need to talk about corals and protect them. We were putting coconut leaves in the sea, tying them together as bubu, as unjam.
Unjam, for fishing.
To aggregate fish. So one of the reasons people put artificial stuff in the water is to aggregate fish. It can be for fishing, but it can also be if that area has got no underground rugosity, no structures. So you put something so that there's place for small fish to hide. When there's small fish hiding, big fish will come to eat that small fish, and bigger fish will come to eat that big fish, right? So that's one reason we are making, it's called a FAD, a fish aggregating device. The second one is truly for artificial reefs, right? These are normally things that you would expect to last longer in the water, usually made from concrete, rock, yeah, things that are going to be down for decades. And these would normally be also kept at a certain depth where you would have maximum coral growth. Okay, so you'd want it shallower rather than deeper. And the third one is specifically for tourism, okay, for divers to go, for skin divers, snorkelers, free divers, right? And a good example of this is KM Sipadan, which was put at 30 meters, right? So definitely not for corals to grow, because corals not going to grow at 30 meters, right?
Yeah.
It was specifically put there for divers to go and practice dive skills, do your deep water dive, do your wreck dive. Now this one, put in Monkey Bay, again, was specifically put at a shallow depth, right, at 18 meters. It was put in a sandy area, not on a reef, on a healthy reef or whatever. It was put in a sandy area, in a bay that is sheltered for divers and snorkelers and free divers to go and visit. Okay, and my take is that is something positive.
Okay.
You know why? It takes pressure off the natural reef, right? So all these people now that are doing that one dive on that LRT would, if not, be diving a healthy reef,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
So now instead of doing, I'm coming in to do a 5 dive trip to Tioman, I'm doing 4 on a reef and 1 on this wreck. That's 1 less on the reef. And they put it shallow specifically so that you can bring new divers that are still working on their kicking skills, still working on their buoyancy, still haven't figured out how to move properly,
Yeah.
right? Bring it to the train, sit on it, kick on it, touch it.
Yeah.
It's man-made,
Yeah.
right? It's fine. I don't want these divers on renges.
On reefs. Yeah.
Yeah, stepping on the corals, kicking on the thing, kicking up the sand, touching, pushing off because they're too heavy, right? So I think it is positive. Now, the big question has been, pollution. But this is a marine park, guys. You do not get a permit to sing something unless you've gone through the process. And I was involved in a little bit of this, so I know.
Okay.
I was brought in to comment as well when they first were talking about this, just on things like location, suitability. And I know the Department of Fisheries did put guidelines on how this train needs to be prepped, how it needed to be cleaned, how they had to remove all the glass so that it's safe. It's safe for people. The engine was taken out, the wiring, all the electronic components, the chips were removed, right? So they've already prepped it for sinking. It's not like there was 2 trains on the side, like, jom, let's put this in the sea,
Bam.
put in the sea. No, right? Before it was brought into island, there was already the day after me day actually, they did a check in Tanjung Gemok. And the guys, the Department of Fisheries from Putrajaya came down and inspected it, and it got the sign off, and only then it was brought to the island and sank. You know, so if you ask me, something that is done like this, that is thought through, that has a specific objective, planned out, prepped, done properly, it can be very beneficial to the environment. But people mustn't get the wrong idea, because I've also seen a refrigerator, TV, washing machine in the sea in Tioman. And then people are telling me, I'm making an artificial reef.
Yeah.
That's not going to help anybody. No diver is going to dive that. No coral is going to grow on that. You know, that's just littering. Yeah. So we must be very clear on what we are doing, and then the approach has to be systematic and proper, and then it can have a lot of beneficial value.
Based on your expertise and your data collections throughout, the years, right? How long do you think marine life or even corals will be able to start to grow and flourish at this artificial reef? Or will they ever be any corals that we're able to grow on this train?
On the LRT train,
Yes.
because it is not too deep, I think you will get coral settling on it. But the big question is, if we're going to have lots of divers on it, which is why it was put there, there's going to be a lot of contact, right? People are going to be on the top, people are going to be swimming through. So corals might not be able to grow very large because the chances of them getting knocked off is higher. So I honestly don't see this as an artificial reef project, right? It's going to be there, but the main objective isn't for corals to grow. Main objective is an underwater place where divers could go and practice skills and dive and enjoy and talk about it. To be honest, Adam, I don't think we are going to get a nice healthy reef out of these two trees. No, I think we will see fish. I did see a mantis shrimp already burrow right next to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's like one of the biggest mantis shrimp I've seen on Tioman. So
how big is it?
So it was in the hole, but the hole was like that big, right? Which is quite big lah for mantis kan. Yeah, so I don't think we'll get lots of corals growing on it. But how long? So the next spawning is in April, right? Well, now it's bleaching, so I don't expect corals to spawn towards the end of the year. Tioman normally corals spawn in April and then again in October, November. I really doubt they'll spawn in October, November because of the bleaching. So maybe we'll see something in April. So if the spawning happens in April, maybe we'll get some settlement. So maybe towards the mid of next year, we should see some starting to grow.
Based on what Alvin has said, it's more like a training ground, a nursery for beginners diver. Please do be aware of those of you who are listening. It does not mean that you can actually go in there and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It is still a wreck. It still has a lot of hazards down there. So be careful. Listen to your instructors. Listen to your dive master and do what it's safely for you. And also, I've heard that in respect for the Sultan, please do not step on the roof. There's a memo that actually came out to those of you who are going to the wreck. The name of the dive sites and also the name of the Sultan is actually printed at the roof of the
cabin. I mean, of the
train.
coach. Of the coach.
So those of you who are going, be respectful, take pictures, take videos, and blow bubbles. That's the only thing that you can do. And of course, safety is the most important. It's a beginner dive site. But that doesn't mean that you can negate safety and everything.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Alvin, do you have any message to the fellow listeners? What is your message to those who are listening right now?
I usually always end by telling people, if you're listening and you've never been to a reef firsthand, you need to go and witness it. You need to go and experience it firsthand, because only then you will truly understand why people like us love coral so much, right? And tak kenal maka tak cinta, kan? Right? But this is a podcast about diving, so I'm guessing most of the listeners are already divers. So for this group, my main takeaway is, when you go diving, look for the environmentally sustainable dive shops. Look for the ones that are certified, that are eco-friendly, that are trying their best to protect the environment and support them. Because it is not easy, it is expensive even sometimes to keep up with reducing your impacts, right? So give them the support and search them out, because there are many out there that are really trying to be a good example for divers.
To those of you who are keen in marine conservation and would like to do their part for the ocean, please do contact Alvin. Alvin runs a lot of programs for the volunteers. You can do a lot of things like me and Dicky. We are eco-divers. We are certified to survey the reef. And if you would like to do that, please do contact Alvin. There's a program that you can actually take and then volunteer to do your part as a diver. Thank you so much to Alvin taking his time out of his busy life and also his family
time.
Yeah,
No
to come and
worries.
talk to us.
We appreciate you
welcome.
coming to the podcast and share your.
Most welcome. Thanks for having me and sharing the word.
And to those of you who have more questions in regards to conservation and the things that Reef Check do, you can actually contact us, and then we'll put you to the right channel, which is Alvin. Or you can just go straight to the Reef Check website.
Yeah.
Then,
So the
contact
website
Alvin.
is www.reefcheck.com.
org.my.
.my. Yeah.
Okay. Or
Social
visit
media.
Alvin's social media, his Instagram, his Facebook. I will put the link in the description.
Yeah.
So please do check it out. Okay, once again, thank you, Alvin, for coming. It's been a very educational podcast for me. I've learned a lot of things.
Yes, same here.
Yeah,
Same here. And
that I've never actually thought about.
And we really hope that the listeners out there are happy with the topic that we bring out this episode. If there's something that we have not covered, send feedback to us, and then maybe we can do another podcast and another session with
Definitely
Alvin.
to invite Alvin again.
Yes.
Sure,
to
man.
ask about the questions that everyone has been, all the things that everyone has been debating. There's always debates about a lot of other things like the COVID thing that I told you about.
Yeah.
He's the right person to talk to. Us divers, we are just like blowing winds and bubbles to each other. There's no fact, there's no data or anything. He's the one. He's exactly the one that we need to talk
And
to.
I think caught me when you said, as an instructor, let's do more for our reefs and our environment out there, and get the students we teach a little bit more concerned about the reefs and teaching them whatever we can teach and include conservation in our courses. So yeah, and with that, I would really like to urge each and everyone out there, our listeners, the divers out there, to start take things seriously with conservation, and maybe taking diving courses as you knowing how to dive. But I think it's also really important to understand the reefs and so on. So doing conservation courses is really important. If you really love the sea, if you really love diving, then I think this is something that each and every one of us have to consider and work towards learning and understanding. Yeah. Again, thank you, Alvin.
Most welcome.
And we would like to say our goodbyes to the listeners, and hopefully we will catch you guys on the next one.
Thank you, and see you guys in our next episode.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.